So, Paul's a little taller than I am. Most people are, Don said. Sadly, it's true. I was at the doctor this week. I had my annual physical, and I got measured, and she said 5, 8 3/4. And I went, seriously, you couldn't give me a quarter of an inch. I can't be 5'9", right? 5, 8 3/4. Okay, well, anyway. I wonder if anyone has ever been so important to a people or to the founding of a nation. Of all the characters in the Torah, I would argue that none is more important, none is more influential, none is more worthy of praise for their courage and cleverness and foresight and vision than this person who isn't even named in their own story. Obviously, I'm talking about the story of Moses, and we all know that Moses goes on to accomplish things of legend, right? Standing on the side of justice and righteousness, confronting this evil of slavery, gathering his people together, leading them out through the waters of freedom into the wilderness of formation. God's chosen instrument for the birth of a people, Moses. Who's greater than Moses? Right? But Moses is not the focus of this story for me. Have you ever heard of the midwives in this story? Shiphrah and Puah? You have to be careful how you say it. Shiphrah and Puah. Heroes in their own right, commanded by a frightened Pharaoh to carry out his order of genocide. And what was it about genocide in those days? Right? It seems like every time you turn around the Bible, somebody's commanding all the boy children to be killed. I mean, I know that the male children were favored, but they had to get through that first year. Right? It seems things were always a little dicey for them. Pharaoh had decided that the Hebrews are getting too numerous, so numerous that if they aren't dealt with, they might pose a threat to his power. And he orders all the male babies to be killed. And he tells these midwives, these labor and delivery nurses of their day, Shiphrah and Puah, whenever they are working with a Hebrew woman in labor, as soon as the baby is born, if it's a boy, kill it. Sort of the opposite of what happens in some countries today. Right? But Shiphrah and Puah have had enough of this madness. They say yes, but they mean no. They have their fingers crossed behind their back, and thank God for that. Because without Shiphrah and Puah, the story of Moses would have been a lot shorter. Right? Who knows if we sit here today, if not for them. But Shiphrah and Puah aren't the ones I want to talk about either. There's another woman that is really at the center of this whole message. Do you know her name? Anybody? Not Miriam, right? Miriam is Moses' sister. Not Pharaoh's daughter, although she also was heroic in her own way. The woman doesn't get named here, but elsewhere in the genealogies of Exodus and Numbers, we do learn her name. Does anyone know it? Jochebed. 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 Moses' mother. And it's actually her story that I think is the most interesting. She was the daughter of Levi, granddaughter of the patriarch Jacob, and according to some sources, she married her own nephew, Amram. And together they had 3 children. Do you know who they are? Nathan? The 3 children. Moses, Miriam, Aaron, right? The 8 o'clockers got this right. I just want you to know. I mean, they had it. I don't know. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Okay, all of those children more famous than Jochebed. A Hebrew woman pregnant with a Hebrew male child when Pharaoh makes his famous decree. Perhaps even aided herself in delivery by those clever and courageous midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. Jochebed does deliver a son, and rather than surrender him to death, she devises a plan to save him, and it was quite an extraordinary plan. She built this boat. Now, the text calls it an ark. It uses a Hebrew word that is only used one other place in the whole Bible. Where? No, right? Interesting, though, right? She builds an ark. out of papyrus and made it waterproof with tar or pitch, and she places her precious son there where she knew Pharaoh's daughter would see him. So the first bit of brilliance of her plan is that she knew if anyone was going to save the life of her Hebrew child condemned to die, it would have to be Pharaoh's daughter, and that, in fact, is exactly what happened. She places little Moses in the ark and sets him down in the reeds so it will look like he has been abandoned, and she withdraws a little bit, telling her daughter Miriam to stay close, right? Keep an eye on the basket. And along comes Pharaoh's daughter, who notices something in the reeds and probably hears the cry of a child, and she plucks little old Moses out of that ark and decides to keep him and raise him as her own. But wait, someone must nurse this child, right? Pharaoh's daughter hadn't had a child. She was not ready to nurse a child. So, brilliant plan part 2, right? Miriam, who just happens to be standing there, suggests that she will go and get a Hebrew woman to nurse this Hebrew child. And Pharaoh's daughter tells her, go and find one. And of course, who does she pick? Jochebed, right? Unbeknownst to Pharaoh and his daughter, she picks Jochebed. And the rest, as I said, is history. Really, the plan works. Moses survives his childhood, death sentence, lives into adulthood, eventually strikes that Egyptian worker, and the plan, God's plan, comes together. From Moses to David to Mary to Jesus to us. Where are we as a people without Moses? And where is Moses without Jochebed? It was her plan not just to have him and hide him, which surely would have meant death for him, but the brilliance of her plan, her sacrifice, was in turning him loose, but not letting him go. All that to say this. Long way to go, right? Hear me. The brilliance of her plan was in turning him loose, but not letting him go, which is what I do want to talk about, because that is the way that I see God working in our lives today. You can hold something too tightly, you know, right? You can hold it so tight that you squeeze the life out of it, especially when it is young and tender. Has anyone ever held a baby chick? Or a baby rabbit? Or a baby anything? Right? How do you hold such a thing? Gently, gingerly, just enough to keep it from jumping out of your hands and falling to death and injury, but not so tight that you harm it by holding it, right? And that is what Jochebed did with Moses. She knew that if she held on to him too tightly, she would lose him forever. And not only would her heart be broken, but God's plan for Israel's salvation would be thwarted. And in order to keep him, she had to turn him loose. But she didn't let him go entirely. That's my point. She kept him in her sights. She kept herself close enough to keep him from harm. She had saved him once at his birth, and she was determined to keep him safe again. And when he made it safely to his new life, she was still there loving him as a mother, not just from afar, but intimately involved in his new life, feeding him, nurturing him, protecting him. And so my question today is, can you feel God's grip in your life? Right? How is God's grip in your life? Do you ever feel like God is holding you so tightly, he is squeezing the life out of you? Probably not too many. Do you ever wonder whether God is actually holding you at all? Probably a lot more are in that place. God saves us at our baptism, claims us at our baptism, holds us in his arms at our baptism, but then God turns us loose into the world and into our family and into our community, bringing people into our lives that will help us to find our own truth in life. God doesn't just hold us and squeeze us and say, believe in me, doggone it, or else it's all over. I'll squeeze the death out of you if you don't say the right words. It's not like that. God turns us loose. But God doesn't let us go, right? Somehow you found your way here. Somehow I found my way here. That is God's great promise, that we are not alone. We are never alone. That we are held in this loose but loving grip of God, who is never far away, like Jochebed, who watches and loves and never lets us go. I can guarantee you That those times when you feel as though God is not holding you at all, as though God wouldn't be able to find you even if God was looking for you, God has you in the grip that is just right? Not too tight, not so loose that you fall. Are there things in your life, are there people in your life that you are holding too tightly? Are there ministries? Are there places? Are there jobs? Are there dreams? What are you holding so tightly that you're squeezing the life out of it? What have you let go and get too far away? What if you just loosened your grip a little bit and held everything? See, I think we're meant to hold everything in our lives in this loose, loving grip. If you hold too tightly to anything, you squeeze the life out of it. What if you loosened your grip? Might some marvelous new plan of God be allowed to take shape?